Hi there and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be continuing the video series which I'm doing about things to consider when buying a property in Portugal, particularly a rural property in Portugal, and this is the third video in the series. So the next thing that I think is important or desirable when buying a property, particularly again a rural property, someplace with a garden, would be, is there water on the land? What do I mean by that? I mean, is there a well, or is there one of these things called a furosal de agua, which is like some kind of borehole? It's not like a full well, but you can basically get groundwater out of it. It is very, very useful for watering the garden, and it can also be used for swimming pools. You could even use it for showering and things like that, but you would have to filter it in that case, probably. It's not technically legal, as far as I know, to use it for drinking water. The water company basically insists, and I think it's actually been encoded into the law, that you have to use the water from the water company. So I think it's not acceptable legally to be off-grid for water if you can be on-grid. So the idea being, if there's a connection available, you're kind of legally obligated to connect to it. At least that's my understanding. Anyway, if you can have a well or some kind of borehole, it's immensely convenient for things like filling a swimming pool or for watering the garden. It will save you a lot of money because in summertime it's very, very hot here. Maybe for about 4 or 5 months of the year you have to put quite a bit of water on the garden if you've got flowers or some kinds of trees or grass or vegetables growing or anything like that. So if you go to a property and you find that it has like this kind of feature, if it's a well, make sure that it's actually still operational, because many of them have dried up over the last decade or so in central Portugal as the level of aquifers has been depleted. But if it's functioning, if it still has water, then it's definitely something that adds a little bit of value, and you can definitely make use of it. So it's something to pay attention to. The next thing is septic tanks. Now, in rural Portugal, you're going to come across quite a lot of properties with septic tanks. Now, when I first heard that my property had a septic tank, I was like, oh no, oh God, no, I don't want that. And I really, really, really had to do quite a bit of research, and it took quite a bit of persuasion in order to get me to accept the idea that my property was not connected to like main sewage. The reason that I was so against it is I just have this idea that it's like this immensely dirty and expensive thing as well. If you want to pump it, it will cost a lot. At least that was my perception. The reality is septic tanks are absolutely brilliant. They are absolutely fabulous. And I wish every property that I have in the future has a modern septic tank like I have. I have friends who live nearby and they have a modern septic tank. They've lived in their property for 4 years and they've never had to empty it once. I have another friend who's been in his house for 10 years and he's emptied it precisely once, and it cost him 14 euros to pump it. In contrast, if you connect to like the local water company for sewage disposal, where I live it's not even an option, gladly. You're going to be paying like 10 euros a month or something for water waste on your bill, plus IVA and all the other fees that they add to it. There are three components of a water bill. The first one is the water supply, the water you actually use. The second one is sanitation, taking away wastewater, and the third one is solid waste, like the stuff you throw in the garbage can, which is also linked by some bizarre formula to the amount of water you use. So I only have two elements on my water bill, which is water supply and garbage disposal. I don't actually have the sanitation, the wastewater. And that's fantastic because it makes my water bill considerably lower than some other people who are connected to this. So, my friend said, 14 euros a decade, basically, he's paid to empty the septic tank, because if you do not have the availability of connecting to the sewage network, it's immensely cheap to get the septic tank clean. The Câmara Municipal or organise somebody to come and do it, and the price is very, very low. It only becomes expensive if there's the option to connect to the main sewage and you've refused. There the price goes up. But if you actually have a septic tank and you don't have the option to connect to the main sewage, it's cheap, and it occurs really once in a blue moon. And I've never had any trouble with having a septic tank. It has been a very, very good experience, and I think it's perceived wrongly by a lot of people because I myself had that kind of preconceived negative idea about it, and I really couldn't have been more wrong. Next thing to think about, especially in rural Portugal, if you're a little bit further out, is that if you're the kind of person that gets a lot of deliveries, like either from Amazon or if you're getting like boxes shipped in, my wife has the habit of ordering things from China and they arrive in big boxes by UPS or FedEx or whatever kind of company that delivers them. Now, if you're living in a remote area, and they do actually categorize it as a remote area, then deliveries are going to be slower and they're also going to be more complicated. And by more complicated, what happens is that the drivers often try techniques to get you to go to a service point and pick it up. Basically ways for them not to do their job. They don't want to drive to you and deliver this thing, so they will make up all kinds of stories. I've had lots of different ones over the years. The address is not clear. I've almost finished my run. I can't go back today. Can you come and pick it up? They will just tell you whatever they think will be effective to get you to go to the service point so they don't actually have to do it. Now, if that's the kind of thing that bothers you, then you should really check out the status with deliveries in the area before you buy a property there, because my wife can't take it. She gets furious when they do this. They promise to deliver something on a day and then it doesn't arrive. When we lived in Coimbra, deliveries were very, very good, particularly UPS. Since we moved here to rural Leiria, deliveries have been less reliable by far. I can definitely say that. We do generally get them to come after some argument sometimes, but it's not smooth. And we frequently find them playing little tricks on us, like asking us to confirm the address because the details were not clear, when we know perfectly well the address details were completely clear, and when the box arrives it has like 4 address labels. Some of them have been put on in China and it's exactly the same address, and it was abundantly clear throughout the entire process, but they just tried it on. So if that bothers you, you should probably check it out before you buy a property. Getting a lawyer who is competent as part of the process is a really key step for any buyer of property in Portugal, and that goes for new houses, older houses and land. But I think it's probably more important for older houses and land. You need to get a lawyer who is capable of doing all of the proper due diligence checks on the deeds of a property, making sure that it is actually what has been stated by the seller, that all the buildings are legal and that kind of thing, and that what you're actually buying is what you think you're buying. And beyond that, you have to check that the ownership of the property is actually in the hand and exclusively in the hand of the person who's selling it, because that can be a problem, especially with land or older properties, because you might have some kind of contention between family members going back generations maybe about who owns something. So that's something you don't want to be involved in. You would want to walk away from one of those, in my opinion anyway. And in addition to that, you have debts. You have to make sure that the person who is the current owner of the property has not attached any loans, or they don't owe tax debts on the property or anything like that, because unfortunately in Portugal, for both homes and land and even cars, as far as I understand, if there is a debt attached to it and you buy it, then you may become liable for that debt as a new owner, and that would be a very unwelcome surprise. So it's really, really necessary to pay a lawyer to check this out thoroughly. Some of the bigger agencies, like Remax, for example, They have their own in-house lawyers who can do this for you if you trust them to do it. Or of course you're welcome to hire your own individual lawyer just to cater for your needs. But it is something that needs to be checked. It needs to be checked extremely thoroughly before you make a move on a property. And I really can't express how important this is, because it's one of those things that could just lead to a pretty disastrous outcome if it's ignored and there are things, under the carpet waiting and hidden to come out after the purchase is complete. I also think that getting a buyer's agent involved in the process is particularly helpful, especially for foreign buyers. Unless you know the market very well in Portugal, it really, really helps. Now, when I'm talking about a buyer's agent, what I mean is basically a real estate agent who represents you as the buyer rather than the real estate agent who's representing the seller. Now, what I'm not saying is you should rush out there and pay one of these services that you can find online that tend to be pretty expensive, in my opinion. They're charging, up to $10,000 or more for assistance in finding a house in Portugal. I don't think that's necessary at all. You can simply approach basically any one of the big agencies in Portugal, and you can say, hey, I'm a buyer. I want to find a property like this. Can you help me to do this? And their agent will probably be pretty happy to help you do that and to represent you. You don't even need to pay. And the reason for that is what they will do is they will contact the sellers of the property and they will usually anyway negotiate to split the commission. And this is the commission that the seller would be paying to the seller's agent anyway. So the situation may be that the buyer's agent gets like 1 to 2% commission and the seller's agent gets 3 to 4% commission instead of the seller's agent getting all 5%. And agents are pretty much fine with this. During the process where I was buying properties, I identified several that I was interested in, and none of them rejected the idea of sharing the commission with the buyer's agent. It just didn't happen. So I think that this is something that people should definitely look into, because it can give you, a degree of expertise which you simply don't have, and it can also let you deal with someone who knows the process very, very well. And also negotiation. I think negotiation is something which the buyer's agent would be in a position to help you with. If anyone wants to email me, they can. I don't want to put people's email addresses in the video descriptions or anything like that, but I have a very, very good buyer's agent located in Coimbra, whose name is Andre Marquez. He did an exceptional job for me, and I would thoroughly recommend his services. If anyone is interested in that, I will respond with his details. Next up is pricing. I think that a lot of people have formed the idea in Portugal that the price is not that negotiable, and to some extent that's true, because there are sellers who are just in my opinion, quite crazy. They set these really high or ambitious prices, and then their properties sit on the market for years and years and years, and they don't move. And that's because they're fixated on getting this price which nobody wants to pay, and they won't listen to any kinds of offers. But I think that, that component of the sellers is not the majority. I think most people who put their property on the market are people who are looking to sell their property and move on to something else. So, they don't want to sit with their property on the market for an indefinite period of time. They want to sell it, and I think those people are open to negotiation. I looked at about 8 houses during the process of buying for myself, and all of the sellers were open to negotiation. And that's where a buyer's agent comes in, and that person can suggest, is the house actually worth this much money, in his opinion, based on what he's been buying and selling and his knowledge of the market, and what would be a good bid to put in. He can talk to the seller's agent and maybe get some additional information about what existing bids have been put in the past and what the seller's true expectations are. That kind of information is sometimes exchanged between the agents, and certainly was in our case. And I think that a realistic discount percentage in Portugal is probably somewhere between 5 and 10%. I mean, obviously sometimes you can get more, but that tends to be on properties which are in very poor condition, or properties that have been on the market for a very, very, very long time, or land which is in the same kind of situation. But generally speaking, 5 to 10% is probably obtainable in a lot of cases. Of course, I can't say all cases, but that's the kind of range of discount you should be thinking about. You shouldn't be thinking that you're going to walk in there and get 50% off. I think that would be a really exceptional case, and probably a property which is in pretty poor condition, to be honest. Next up, just a word on being off-grid. If you're thinking, oh, there's this little beautiful house and it's off-grid, it'll be fantastic. I urge you to think very, very carefully about that, because if it's off-grid in the sense that it doesn't have an internet connection, it's no big hassle, you can get Starlink. But if it's off-grid, as in like no electricity and no water supply, then that's going to be significantly more challenging. Now, water is doable if you have a well and you have an electricity source and you have a filtration mechanism, then you can do water. If you're having to filter all your water from groundwater, though, it's unlikely to be that much cheaper, or any cheaper actually. It might even be more expensive than simply buying it from the water company. But of course that might not be available where that house is located, so it's something to consider. Electricity, you're going to go with solar. I mean, if anyone's thinking about going with wind, then just don't think about that. Wind power turbines, I've thought about getting one. They're almost like a decoration. They're not nearly as useful as they're made out to be. Solar panels do work, however, but if you are thinking about being off-grid, then you need really a lot of solar panels, and you're going to need a decent sized battery system, which means it's going to be expensive, and of course the batteries are only going to last about 8 or 9 years, and then you're going to have to switch them out, and that's going to be expensive again. So the cost of being off-grid is really high. You might think that you're generating all your electricity for free from the solar panels, but in reality you're paying through the nose for the batteries, and you're going to end up just paying a lot of money to be off-grid. And if it's cloudy for weeks on end, you might have to be in the situation where you're either using a diesel backup generator, or you're conserving your power to a very, very low level. I would say a level of inconvenience to be able to get by on what you're generating, whether it's like 3, 4, 5 kilowatts per day or something like that. It wouldn't be my cup of tea. I definitely wouldn't want to do it. And I have solar, I know how it works, and I know that it really wouldn't be practical to exist off-grid on it. Not for a large house like mine, definitely not. Lastly, I'm going to come back to water again, and this time it's going to be about water hardness or softness. I hate hard water, and I think most people do, and it's something that I guess not many people think about when they're buying a house. They don't think, oh, does it have hard water or soft water in the area? Well, you really should, because if you have hard water, it will absolutely kill extremely expensive equipment in your house, such as your washing machine and your heat pump and your water heater, or whatever you've got going on there, your radiators, all of these kind of things are going to get clogged up over time with limescale, and it's really, really detrimental to your pocket, because you're going to have to replace these machines far, far sooner, and they are expensive machines. Plus the fact that for drinking the water and even bathing in the water, it's definitely less good if the water is hard. So you're probably going to have to buy bottled water or invest in more water filters and things like that. You can look at a map, which I will show on the screen now, and I'll also post in the description to this video, and you can check whether the council or municipality that you're intending to buy in has hard water, soft water, medium water. Okay, I bought in a place which had soft water. It's something which I considered before I bought here, and I'm very, very happy with the results. But I would never buy in a place like, for example, there's a town nearby called Sur, which is notorious for having hard water. Or another place near Coimbra where I have some friends living, Montemor Ovelio. It's also very, very hard water there. And Figueira de Foz, when I lived there, the water was, full of calcium, it seemed. So yeah, I mean, it's not a thing which is very, very pleasant, and it's something to be avoided if possible. And when you're buying a property, there's no reason why you shouldn't consider this before you buy. All right then, well, that brings us to the conclusion of this series, I think, unless I think of anything more. I hope people found the video informative, and I will see you soon in the next video.